Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for the Superintendent's Report. I'm Carol Birdsong, and joining me to discuss all things Williamson County Schools is Williamson County Schools Superintendent Jason Golden.
Yes, ma'am.
We are going to talk about the Williamson County School Board meeting for the month of April, which, as we record this, happened last night. And we're going to talk about some other things going on in the district in about the next 30 minutes. We are going to start, first of all, we were able last night to celebrate 78 National Merit finalists for Williamson County Schools. And it's always exciting. That is another record. And so when those students, they take the PSAT test their junior year, and then they go through the process, and you know it better than I do, but 78 is a district record, and it just opens so many doors for students.
It really does. There's a limited number of students nationwide who get this designation, 50,000 nationwide, and then they break it down by state. Before COVID, we had in the 50s, and then we had a significant jump into the 70s about 2 years ago.
Well, we had 71 last year.
And then the year before that, we were right in that area. And at the time, I knew that we had established an emphasis on that, but I suspected it was because we fought that battle to stay in school every day during COVID, and so many of our peers across the nation didn't. So I had anticipated that we might go back down to our typical, what used to be our typical numbers, but we continue to grow. So it's really a credit to our students, it's a credit to our teachers who are working hard on making that an emphasis. And you talked about the benefit for students. Many colleges make that a standard for those really large scholarships, the National Merit Scholar. Also, some of those very selective colleges and universities use that as a significant criterion for admission to the schools. So we're very proud that we can open those doors for so many of our high-performing students, and those numbers are continuing to grow.
Yeah, very good. So that's one test that students take, the PSAT, to earn national merit status. Right now, we are going through our state assessments, the Tennessee Comprehensive Assessment Program, otherwise known as TCAP, and then the end of course test as well at some of those middle and high school courses. Our testing window opened yesterday, and we'll go now for a couple of weeks, really.
Well, that's right. Our testing window closes on April 28th, and as we sit here, frankly, I can't even remember the date, but it's about a week and a half for TCAP. TCAP is the state assessments that all our students in grades 3 through 8 take, and then our end-of-course tests that the state actually administers as well are happening right now, especially at the high school level. Many of our middle school students are taking those tests as well. You know, there's been a debate for decades about the argument of how many tests ought to be administered, how many tests students ought to take. You may hear the phraseology of teaching to the test, that kind of thing. What we know here in Williamson County is if we teach the Tennessee standards, we teach them well. If we teach those standards with the high rigor that our students need to master as they prepare for the next level, then the tests generally take care of themselves. There's a little bit of test prep to make sure that students understand the logistics of the test, but the reality is if you spend all year teaching your students the standards and preparing them, then the tests are just the next step in the course of the school year. And that's the focus that we have. And that focus, I am convinced, has led to good results for our students over time. Now, over time also, the state has made some changes. Students now have to incorporate a portion of their grade at a lot of grade levels for these tests. So there is an increased importance on these tests. Likewise, especially for third graders this year, there's a significant change.
Let's talk about the new law that takes effect with this testing period. So our current third graders, it's become truly a high stakes test for them.
Thank you for that, and that is a phraseology we use, high stakes test. About 2 years ago, the Tennessee legislature passed a law that if students don't perform at a certain level on the third grade ELA, the English test in TCAP as third graders, then there are some impacts, some consequences for that performance. Generally speaking, if they perform at below basic or what's called approaching, then they have to commit to some interventions in order to move on to fourth grade. If they score below, they must take a summer school, a 4-week summer school, the summer after their third grade year, and do tutoring over the course of the next year. If they score at the approaching category, they must do one or the other. There's a lot of details associated with that, a lot of details associated with the tutoring process, a lot of details associated with the summer school program, which includes an assessment at the end of that, a test at the end of that to determine whether a student has shown some growth. But this year, for third graders, some students who don't meet those state standards are going to have to do those things, or they must be retained in third grade. Now, our board and a lot of educators across the state have had a lot of discussions, a lot of concerns about this law that the legislature passed. There's some discussion right now at the state legislature about making some adjustments to it, but none of those bills truly eliminate that. So we're at that spot where these third graders, this cohort of third graders, are subject to what is now a substantially high stakes test.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Parents can't do anything to change that. The school district cannot do anything to change it. It is based on their test results.
It's state law. So the last 2 years we've actually done the summer program. It's been by invitation, and as much as we could staff, some parents chose the program. The truth is those programs have been good. They've been good for a lot of individual students. The difference this year is there's a mandatory nature for some students. Parents can't change that unless they convince their legislators to change it. We're subject to that state law. You know, there are so many reasons for it. I don't know that I could articulate what each legislator was thinking. And there are so many effects of this. I want to mention a couple of items related to that. Number one, there is some research that indicates that third grade is a key point to determining student success through high school. The graduation rates, how students do after graduation, et cetera. There's a lot of research that relates how students read at third grade to how they do at that level. One difficulty we have is that there's not any direct relationship from research between the standards that are in third grade Tennessee ELA and that particular research. Nobody's done that research on the Tennessee test. So I think that the legislature's heart's in the right place to recognize that that is a key point. For us, we know it's the preparation time for kindergarten, first and second grade, and third. Leading up to that prep work is very important. And on the back end as well, if a student hasn't reached that grade level, we have a lot of interventions over the course of their career. So for us, last year's numbers, because of the way the test is established and administered and the prep that we did for it, about 1/3 of our students would have fallen into one of those two categories of below or approaching at third grade. Statewide, it's about 2/3. So we're somewhere around double the state performance on that test. On the other end of that spectrum, at our high school level, our graduation rate's usually 97, 98, somewhere in that range. And somewhere between 80 and 85% of our students actually go to college. So you can see, statistically speaking, there's not a direct relationship between how a student does in third grade and how a student is prepared to go to college, at least based on our data. But the interventions are good. And so the legislature had specified this particular year that third grade was the year for that summer school program. And they had originally planned not to fund summer programming for kindergarten, first, and second. In the course of this legislative session, they've made a change. And I really think it's a wise change, that they reestablished funding for some of the summer programs for those youngest grades as well. So we had done it the last 2 years. We're planning on providing those services for kindergartner through those upper grades as well. So we may make some recommendations to parents for some of those youngest grades. If you've got some time, we need to have you in that summer program so that you can prepare. So when that crisis point comes at third grade, you've done as much preparation as you can for your child. Now, a little interest.
I just want to say, but just to be clear, the legislature, as we sit here today, is still in session. They're just passing this legislation to go effect really 6 weeks from now.
Well, that's right. There's a lot of detail that we haven't gotten yet from the state that we're going to have to prepare for. On the good end of that, we've done the summer program for K and up the last 2 years. So we have curriculum ready. We have the basics of that. The concerning part is we don't know exactly what the state's going to expect of us, and we are just 6 weeks or so from June 1st,
Yes.
which is when we intend to administer the program. Another part of that is there's a bill that includes a program for rising kindergartners, and that was not part of the state program the last 2 years to prepare for
Let's
that.
just clarify for a viewer who does not know what a rising kindergarten is. That is a student who is not necessarily enrolled in Williamson County Schools at this time, but will be starting kindergarten in the fall.
That's right. And there's no screener test that we have administered the last couple of years on eligibility for the summer programs because we haven't done it. And a lot of our screeners start at kindergarten.
Well, and as the communication person, how do you reach out to and actually reach all of the people who might have a kindergartner starting next year to get them in the next 6 weeks into a summer program?
Well, that's right, and it's a new thing. The concept of it was introduced in the current legislative session, so it's not something we prepared for. This 1 year is going to be extremely volatile because so much of it is new. And I'll add this, our current third graders are those students who were kindergartners that year when the governor asked all schools to close for the spring quarter, the fourth quarter, when COVID really hit Tennessee hard. So that's that group who started out as kindergartners. And so the interventions, as much as we can give students as much as they can bear, I think there's some wisdom in that. The consequences make us concerned. You visualize someone who's held back at third grade, their cohort, we use the term cohort, their
peers.
Their peers. Many of those will move on, they'll be held back at third grade. Is that the best time for that? Would they have been better off at kindergarten being held back? There's a lot of discussions about that, I know, among parents and our administrators as well. Also, you project out, there's also some research that indicates students who are at age 18 and 19, when they hit their senior year of high school, statistically speaking, are less likely to finish. And so you have conflicting research on these issues. So it remains to be seen, the long-term impact on Tennessee. For us, what we focus on is giving that appropriate instruction at those youngest grades to students and making sure we give the appropriate interventions over the course of their career. We've been working on that for a long time. We're finishing up the third year of new ELA curriculum that's research-based to help
English
students.
language arts.
Thank you, we live by acronyms. Our English classes, we're in the third year of an adoption where we, with the leadership of our teachers, adopted English language curriculum that helps push students to a higher lexile level of reading. In other words, they have a higher opportunity to read higher level reading so that they can grow in their reading. So we've been working on this for a long time.
Okay. Well, let's just broad stroke summer school, because summer school, for what you're just talking about, that's going to happen during the month of June. But we have summer school for different grade levels too. So at the high school level, I think we call it credit recovery. And so just talk about.
Well, thank you for that. We do some credit recovery programs for students who might not have passed a particular class, and they spend a lot of time with their administrators. A lot of assistant principals are involved at the high school level in making sure that students have that opportunity to retake a course in a very compressed way to address that. So there's a lot going on in schools. The old tradition of schools let out and then they come back, it's just a myth. We spend a lot of time in schools even during the summer. The old tradition used to be that we'd clean the buildings in the summertime. And now it's just a practical impossibility to do those massive cleanings that used to happen 20 years ago.
I think of Kevin Fortney, who oversees our maintenance department, in our meeting yesterday, and he says, when do I get to when do we get to wax the floors? When do I get to clean the buildings? So it's a challenge.
And that's a sub-issue because we're using our buildings year-round.
That's right. That's right. Let's talk about touch on the Williams County Board of Education meeting that happened last night. On the agenda, under unfinished business, there were two book challenges. One was instructional, one was library, if I recall correctly. Talk about what the board did in that regard.
So Tennessee has changed the laws related to review of books when someone asks us to remove a book from either curriculum or the library. Both of these items on the agenda were library. They were both library books because the old structure used to be that a committee was established and a committee made a decision on a parent's or a citizen's request to remove a library books to the point where no one else has access to it. Now the law is that when someone makes that request, the board has to be the decision maker. They used to be the appellate body. The decision of a committee could be appealed to the board, but now for library books, the board's the decision maker. The impact and importance of this can't be overstated. For generations in this country, we've balanced the First Amendment with access issues. And so we have a policy in place that's designed to honor the First Amendment and student access while still having appropriate materials. The state legislature's been struggling with that. They passed a law related to the phraseology that they use is age-appropriate materials. They've asked another entity, the Tennessee Textbook Commission, to establish some guidelines for schools. The deadline for establishing those guidelines was 6 months ago, and it still hasn't happened. And so from the state level to the local level, there's a lot of struggle with how to address that new law. And the truth is, it's not surprising because the First Amendment is important in our nation. And so that struggle continues. 2 months ago, the committees brought back some recommendations to the board for some books that were challenged by specific parents. And the board, in the middle of the discussion 2 months ago, recognized that they needed to have an attorney-client meeting because of the depth of the First Amendment and all the cases that surround that over the course of really the past 50-plus years. So they had that attorney-client meeting. The issue came back just last night at the April meeting, and the debate continued. And a lot of the discussions surrounded, do we make a decision now? Do we try to wait for some guidance that's supposed to come out from the state? And if I counted correctly, 4 different ideas floated among our 11 board members. 11 of the 12 board members were there. One had had a long time ago scheduled conflict and couldn't make it. So visualize that. 4 different possibilities with 11 people making a decision. Ultimately, the board landed on let's push the vote to June, 2 months from now, to see if there has been a change at the state level where we might get some guidance and then potentially make a decision there. All things being equal, I like to make a decision and move on. But when you're talking about something as significant in our nation as the First Amendment, being thoughtful and wise and making sure everyone is as prepared as they can be to make a decision is important. Now, I will tell you, we've had a lot of public comment from many of our citizens and our stakeholders and our students about this issue. Removing library books from a school library is one of those things that communities have struggled with for generations. So I appreciate that the board's thinking thoughtfully about it. There's so much going on in a school district that you want to make a decision and move on, but this has such long-term implications that ultimately the board, in a split vote, made a decision to see if we could buy some time to get a little bit more guidance.
Well, speaking of long-term, we are in the process of creating our strategic plan for the next 5 years. And lots of meetings, lots of input, lots of work has gone into the process. But we're sort of moving toward the final stages. And if you would please kind of update our viewers of where we are and what they can expect next.
Thank you for that. I'm in my 17th year, I think finishing up my 17th year with the district, and I have been a participant in 3 different strategic plans. For us, our strategic plan has been a significant driver for a lot of decisions we make related to staffing, related to services to students, related to budget. And we are right now 6 years into what was originally intended to be a 7-year plan, and we recognized we hit so many of our goals we needed to make a change. So the last 9 months or so, we've been going through the strategic planning process. We increased the number of stakeholder engagement meetings that we had to try to create a strategic plan that was best for all our stakeholders. I think we had 18 separate stakeholder meetings
yes.
with parents, with county leaders, with our school board members,
Business,
with businesses,
and industry
with
leaders.
PTO leaders, with teacher groups, with students especially. And Lipscomb University has facilitated that plan. I tell you, they've been great.
They have been fabulous to work with. They really, such a smooth, well thought out. You know, I brag on students. I don't brag on processes too much, but it's been a wonderful process.
They've been very thoughtful about it. They've used this process before, and so they had some experience and they know it works. So right now we're at the stage of a steering committee putting together some recommendations based on all that feedback. Our leadership team is looking at it right now. I mentioned to the board that they needed to pencil in an extra meeting for them to think about it. Our original plan was for the board to look at the strategic plan and vote in May. I've come to the conclusion, based on a conversation with our board chair, Angela Durham, that we need to make sure the board has time to process.
Mm-hmm.
So we plan to present the draft strategic plan to the board at our May work session, and then we're going to do that again at the June work session and ask for a vote at the June meeting. And it's going to guide us for the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. I'm excited about it. We've heard so much feedback, and a couple of little anecdotes about it. We are typically the highest, or right around the highest performing school district in the state.
Well, we certainly were last year.
We were number 1 in all categories
Yes.
in grades 3 through 8 last year. And we didn't spend a ton of time in our engagement meetings talking about that. And I believe it's because our community expects that. We spent a lot of time talking about what else we could do, what more opportunities we could offer students, how we can grow and how we can do better. And it's exactly what a strategic plan ought to do for us. So expect to see a combination of some focus points on continuing that excellence, but a large group of focus points on how we can continue to grow and be even better than we've been.
And quite frankly, from all groups, if I recall correctly, a big focus on retaining our teachers, recruiting and retaining our teachers, and many different elements of that work.
There's been a lot of change in the last 5 years in teacher recruiting and retention. The numbers of teachers coming out of college who are ready to go into a K-12 setting has continued to go down. We are becoming and have to become more competitive in attracting and retaining teachers. And so that is a big focus. A lot of our community talked about our teachers need to be paid more. You think about inflation in our area, the cost of housing. Mm-hmm. We are the most expensive area in Tennessee to live. Our per capita income is the highest county in the state, and yet the teachers have not been growing at the rate so many others in the community have been growing. And our families recognize that. Our parents recognize that. So that is a big focus point.
Okay. Very good. Look forward to seeing that next month. So let's talk about, this was another legislative decision that was made a year or so ago, where we have to assess the capacity in each building and see if we have capacity for other students to attend open zone. And then after we do that, I'm trying to do this nutshell as best I can. After we do that, if we exceed the capacity based on interest in those who submit, we have to have a lottery.
Well, that's right. For a number of decades, we've had a structure in place where families could choose an out-of-zone school if we had room. We set up that structure. A few years ago, the state legislature adopted a law requiring that to be done on an annual basis. And actually, I saw some of our policy language in that state law. Last year, the state changed it again and actually increased the requirements and included an element of what they described as a lottery. If, for example, if you had 100 spaces available at a particular school and 105 students applied for out of zone, you couldn't say first come, first serve anymore, which was our old structure. You had to create a lottery. And so we've done that. This is actually the second year we've applied it because the law passed last year.
But this is our first year for a lottery.
That's correct. This year we had 50 open spaces at Ravenwood, and it happened to be 55 families who asked to go to that school out of zone. So our planning and zoning staff conducted a lottery yesterday, and they are today giving notice to everyone who made an out of zone application. Those 5 who, based on that random structure, are number 51 through 55, are actually going to be on a waiting list.
Okay. And so say some people decide, oh no, I don't want to do that anymore, then those people who are on the waiting list would just move up.
That's right. And it's interesting, we try to give choice as much as we can. The numbers of students who choose to go back and forth ends up kind of being a trade-off sometimes. We had 25 students choose Centennial, we had 39 choose Page. It's that kind of mix. I will say, generally speaking, the high schools have a larger number of students who choose that. But even above that, our college and career technical education programs allow students to go attend if there's room. So it's not just open zoning. Some of it is programmatic. We have comprehensive high schools. Renaissance High School is our one school that's an application school. They have about 160 total students, and they don't have a lot of extracurricular activities. But the vast majority of our students go to a comprehensive high school where we do everything we can to offer everything we can. The CCT programs are fairly unique in that we need enough students for those programs to make and survive, and so we do allow students to attend those out of zone.
You just brought up, see, you are doing a beautiful job of allowing me to segue into my next topic, because we only have a few minutes left. But CCTE, we applied for a state grant. We received a state grant for, I think, $15.5 million, and we are creating an innovation hub around CCTE.
In last year's budget, the state administration, the governor, presented what they called an innovative schools grant, an innovative schools model. And the designation was, for every high school you have and every middle school you have, you would be eligible for a grant of $1 million and $500,000 respectively for high school and middle. Our total potential grant amount was $15.5 million. The goal and the ask from the state was that we find something innovative to do in our CTE program. Our team did that, and I'm so proud of what they did. Jeremy Qualls, Dr. Qualls, is our CCTE leader in the district, and he worked months and months putting together a plan for an innovation hub where we can have innovative college and career technical programs that respond to the market in a location. The location that we've chosen based upon our conversations with county government is on Franklin High School's campus, part of what has been the county park. We are in the process of doing plans to build an innovation hub.
Is it where animal control was?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so the county government animal control has moved down Mack Hatcher. The building is still there, and our plan is to tear that down and build that innovation hub there. We're talking right now about specific programs to start when that building opens. Aviation is one item that we've talked about, and maybe a little bit of throwback, including some HVAC, electrical, plumbing, some of those basic skills that for a few decades we haven't offered because we recognize the market demands that and there's some interest. I'm excited about this becoming that movable programming that we can offer our students as our community grows and as our community evolves. Correct
me if I'm wrong, but part of that grant will pay for the construction of a new facility there.
Well, that's right, $15.5 million. I'm just telling you, with the cost of construction.
It doesn't go very far anymore,
well,
does it?
That's right. And so we're being very thoughtful, working with county government. It is their land, working with county government on construction to make sure we come within budget. I'm excited about it because we think about our Entrepreneurship and Innovation Center, which is on the north side of Franklin High School's campus, where students from every one of our high schools are engaging in entrepreneurship work where they're starting their own companies. Right next door is going to be our innovation hub. So it's going to be a location where students gravitate towards those programs. You know, we talk about CCTE, and there's a myth about CCTE that it's vo-tech. I mean, folks who remember that from decades ago, we have students going into college engineering programs at top engineering schools who have engaged in these programs. We have students who engage in these programs and then go on to college. The vast majority of our students go to college. The vast majority of our students in our CCTE programs do that.
Think about our health sciences programs, and
Nursing.
they're able to do internships, I'm calling it probably clinicals or whatever the proper term is at Williamson Medical Center. We have wonderful relationships built, but always looking for more wonderful relationships. So if you have any ideas, reach out to Dr. Jeremy Qualls over at the EIC.
And Carol, I have to mention this. Parents, I know, think about wanting the best possible choices for their child. They think about income, et cetera. This gives students an opportunity to explore their interest and opens doors for them in a different way.
Okay, very good. Our time is up. Thank you so much for being here and answering all my questions, and thank you for joining us for the Superintendent's Report.